Hello, I'm George Liston, CA. Welcome to Dialogue, a program that explores the world of ideas and issues in international affairs, history, and culture. O brave new world that has such creatures in it. That's the stirring exclamation Miranda makes in Shakespeare's immortal play, The Tempest. It's also a sentiment we all can share as we witness the unceasing array of inventions and improvements that technology brings to our daily lives and future prospects. Every significant dimension of life on our planet is powerfully affected by the accelerated pace of technological progress. But these marvels do not come without challenge. With the expanded possibilities come major questions, not the least of which concern the very nature of our human consciousness and the future of humankind. My guest is Dr. William Halal, Professor Emeritus of Science, Technology, and Innovation at George Washington University, founder of Techcast, a web-based system that forecasts technological breakthroughs, and author of Technology's Promise. Dr. Halal, welcome to Dialogue.
Thank you, George. It's good to be here.
It's good to have you here. Dr. Halal, the book is based largely on the analytical work that Techcast does, and it's one amazing revelation after another for the average reader.
Thank you.
But also, and equally impressive, is the background upon which it's based. And let me cite one fact and base the opening question on it. If I read correctly, more than 80% of the scientists, engineers, and inventors ever alive are alive today. I mean, they're with us.
I usually hear 90%, but it's something like that, and that's absolutely true.
It's astounding. And so my first question is, given a community of that extraordinary importance, because these are things that affect us all powerfully, and especially in a political season like the one we're in with the transformation going on, I began to think, are they visible enough in our political structure? And to put a precise point on that, I remember some years ago there was an Office of Technology Assessment, which was done away with.
That's right.
And there's no cabinet position I can think of that corresponds to this. So, since you're in the field, should it be more of a presence in political?
It should. It absolutely should. Science and technology are the driving forces, as you said, behind the advance of civilization. It always has been, and it always will be. And right now we're at the brink of enormous changes caused by what we're calling the technology revolution.
Right. I want to ask you a very specific question about that in just 1 second. Another factor, and I alluded to this in the introduction, is the extraordinary pace at which these things are happening.
Yes.
Again and again in this book, you read about things that are not just on their way, but imminent. And the things we're going to experience, we are experiencing in our own lifetimes. Does that phenomena of accelerated development, sort of an issue in itself as how we as human beings accustom ourselves to the pace of what
I think it is
daily changing?
I hear from people constantly that they don't know how they can keep up with the pace of change.
Yeah, I would be one of them who would say that.
Your PC, for instance, becomes obsolete in about 2 or 3 years. Your cell phone and your digital camera. That's right.
So we're living in this world that just sort of constantly evolves.
It is, and it's extraordinary today, especially because the rate of change is picking up more than it ever has, and that's, I think, because of the influence of information technology.
Exactly, and that's a big part of what we're going to be talking about here.
That's right.
You said just a moment ago, use the word revolution, and I said I want to ask you a question, and the question is this. What's the nature of the revolution that technology poses for us? What makes it distinctive, and if different than previous revolutions?
Well, the thing that's unique, I think, is the role of knowledge.
Knowledge.
Now, knowledge has always been important in civilizations, but this is the first time it's ever been the foundation for an entire social order. Before, knowledge was, the use of knowledge, the manipulation of knowledge was restricted to an elite. But now we have societies in which the bulk of the labor force are knowledge workers. That was a term that Peter Drucker introduced about 20 years ago, and he was exactly right.
Of course, the nature of this knowledge is to create ever more of it. I mean, that's why why we're doing it. So it's a question of abundance, isn't it? I mean, there never will be a sufficiency, I suppose.
No. One of my books was called The Infinite Resource, and it was about knowledge. Knowledge, I think, is an infinite resource. The potential knowledge that we could acquire of the universe is infinite.
Yeah, exciting though.
It is. It really is exciting. I might say that in the book we describe the cause of this acceleration as the virtuous cycle of knowledge. And I think that's a good way to understand what's going on here. The logic is something like this. Information technology, this powerful new force, serves the purpose of accumulating knowledge, allowing us to gather knowledge more effectively. We have these powerful instruments. For instance, the decoding of the human genome was only possible with powerful supercomputers. 3 billion bits of information in DNA. You couldn't have done that on paper. And so we have these more powerful instruments, and scientists and engineers are in touch with one another in real time, working around the world in real time. So knowledge is accumulating as never before because of the power of information technology, which is driving it. And the knowledge, in turn, increases the rate of innovation. That's why corporations and governments are so keen on knowledge, because they know it's the source of all creativity and productivity and innovation. And that, in turn, improves the information systems. And so it's a virtuous cycle. That's what's unique about our time, I feel, this virtuous cycle of knowledge that is accelerating the rate at which knowledge is accumulated.
And of course, all of this presents us with, again, something I think the book makes very patent, which is the challenge of managing this knowledge. Using it wisely, using it in the best interest of humanity, because we can quite easily destroy ourselves with it as well. Which brings us to a phrase you use that I've been dying to ask you about, because I found it intriguing. And let me make sure I got it right, Dr. Halal. You cite a global crisis of maturity that we may be coming to. Now, my shorthand for that may have been a bit too overdramatic as I read this. Does it mean grow up or die?
Well, I think that's really it. I think that is exactly it. I think the world is at that point now where the challenges are so enormous that the present global order will not see us through. I don't think we can muddle through this any longer. The problems that I see are the energy crisis, of course. We know about that. I think oil has peaked in this decade at some point, and the growth of developing countries is just so rapid that the demand for oil is going to outpace the supply. I think that's very clear. The global warming problem, the climate change problem, environmental degradation in general, weapons of mass destruction. These are problems that I don't think can be resolved through with the present mindset, the present global order. And that's why it is a crisis of maturity. The world has to grow up, develop the knowledge, the awareness to address these things in about 10 or 20 years, because global GDP will double in about 11 years, about 2020.
Wow.
Global GDP will double, and with that, all of these problems will increase at a commensurate rate.
This has obvious implications, does it not, for governance? I mean, we're thinking about, I don't know if we can get beyond the nation state in our lifetimes, but becoming more, well, we use the term corporate cooperation for, I guess, the private sector and such. Do you extend that to political, national cooperation?
Well, I don't think we know what the global order will look like when this, when the dust settles. But I think it's going to be some sort of loose affiliation of the nation states into a coherent system, which is lacking now. I remember Bill Clinton said that very nicely. He said there is no world system, and I think that's exactly right. And that is what's badly needed: some sort of coherent global system, not a world government. I don't think that is acceptable, but some sort of collaborative global system.
Right. Okay. That unifies the affluent and the impoverished. It sort of brings everyone into the
well, I'm not sure what will happen in terms of the distribution of wealth, but to bring the nation states into a system where there are rights and responsibilities and laws of some kind. For instance, addressing the climate change problem is going to require some kind of a system to internalize the costs of global greenhouse gases. Either a carbon tax or a cap and trade system. And that's going to require a global agreement on this system.
You know, this book, in chapter after chapter, covers things like what we're talking about now, the crisis in energy and such, that affect every one of us. And I was particularly struck, well, let me cite some very precise examples here, about how direct, because we're speaking in the aggregate, but also just as individual choices, how this comes home in a very vivid way to the reader. Let's take, for example, a promising development in the field of agriculture, like genetically modified foods,
Yes.
which may be, and I think many would argue is, a very important part of resolving the world hunger crisis. Yet, as we both know, and you point out here, it's met with fierce public opposition in
some parts of the world.
And in fact, it's very exciting because it doesn't correspond necessarily to the educational structures of places. I mean, people, you see them react very viscerally to this question of whether they want that kind of food.
That's
or not.
exactly it. It's an emotional response.
How do you deal with that? How do you educate public opinion then for these kinds of change, particularly something like food, which we ingest daily?
Yes. Well, I think the agriculture industry, the food industry, has not dealt with this very effectively. For instance, there's no labeling of genetically modified foods. They have resisted that. The testing has been minimal, and those two measures, I think, stand out as things that could be done. And I think time will sort this out as the use of GMO, genetically modified organisms, is growing quite dramatically, as a matter of fact. And in time, I think the nations and the people who resist this will see the benefits, and with the precautions that we just talked about, labeling and testing, I think it'll be accepted, although under controls.
If I got the essence of what you said, it's essentially an educational
I think it is.
Project.
But a lot of countries are eager for this. The African countries, for instance. I know African leaders have said it's one thing for the Europeans to turn their noses up at this and say it's not a good idea, but our people want this because we want to feed them. And it's going to take something like these technologies to make that possible. These are very powerful technologies.
Right. That's what I was struck by, and what I was edging at earlier, that I was surprised where the opposition comes from, because it is in Europe and here.
It is.
Opposition to it.
That's right. It's that political leaning in Europe that is suspicious of technology, and they articulate the fears that many people have. Of course, that is, you don't want to be fooling around with Mother Nature, and it seems that way. But we've been modifying organisms throughout history. Only it's been done in a different way. Mandel's work and the genetic structure of plants, that's been, and farmers have been doing that for millennia.
I remember studying that in high school.
Yeah, this is just a more powerful and more effective way to do it. It
does point up, though, this very aspect of the subject, something that's true in almost every dimension of what's talked about in this book, and that is potential for cultural conflict and dealing with it worldwide as we bring technology more to bear in a world in which globalization is a factor and disparities between societies is an obvious fact.
Yes.
So.
Yes, I don't know what the answer to the disparities of income is. I have to say that. I mean, that is, you're right, that is a perennial problem. Nothing in this book, I don't think, speaks to that. So I don't have a solution to that.
Right. Well, but the way you raise the issue, I think, is what's informative and helpful to the reader and society. And in the same vein, and continuing the focus on everyday life, some of the most gripping chapters in this book also concern things that, as I put it, provoke deep philosophical concern, and that is, and let me use a precise example here, the chapters on the developments that can be expected in artificial intelligence, robotics in the home and such, and the phenomena that you describe here, and I'd love to hear you comment on teleliving, which is on the horizon. But and as you comment on it, here's the question that occurs, and I think it's forthrightly mentioned, but it's very vivid in the mind of the reader. What will it mean, or does it mean, to be human as we surround ourselves with these devices that are threatening us with rival intelligence, practically?
That I think is really the $64 question. Many scientists today think that consciousness is reducible to the brain, that in principle all of our thoughts and emotions and these lofty feelings about patriotism and love, that all those things are simply epiphenomena. They result from the chemical workings of the brain. And they could be right. I want to say that. We really don't know at this point. They could be right. My guess is they're not right. My guess is that human consciousness is more than sheer information, that there is something, we don't know what it is, higher order thought that is not reducible to the information processes of the brain. Something that, in lieu of a better term, I'm going to call human spirit.
Yes.
Human spirit. And that is the phenomenon that has propelled religiosity and so many other things to dominate the history of humankind, trying to come to grips with that. It's a tangible thing that people experience, and that's and they always have experienced it. Saints, for instance, religious mystics, that consciousness is a very real thing to them. This ephemeral, whatever it is, it's a very real thing. And to think that all that is reducible to the brain, I think, is probably going to be proven wrong.
You deal with this extremely thoughtfully in a sort of, at times quite poetic, concluding essay in here on consciousness. And this issue of the spirit is what you bring this out. And if I got you correctly, as you just said now, you try to combine these two perspectives, you know, that we are,
yes,
and to say that we are more than, quote, wet computers. That
yes,
is to say, not just
yes,
driven by synapses, yes, that connect logical
exactly
connections, but also this ephemeral, but yet quite real notion of there being a human spirit. So I got the impression, I was going to talk about this in the end, but let's talk about it right now.
Sure, good.
That what you were saying is we've got to be attentive to both these aspects of our humanity and hone them both in ways we've never really thought of before. That as these things get more precise, more powerful, robots that can speak, react, do things like, you know, that are just human, we ourselves have to become, if not superhuman, at least as imaginatively, spiritually human as we possibly can to correspond to this.
We are going to rise above the machines. I think that's what this means. The interesting thing about this is that the machines are gaining in their power. That is the record of gains in artificial intelligence, robotics, and that sort of thing. Our forecast is that good artificial intelligence will become common at about 2020, roughly, give or take a few years. The power of an ordinary PC will match the power of the brain at about 2020. That is pretty reliable estimate, I think.
And that is so close.
Yes,
I mean,
that's right.
That's a decade.
A mere 11 years.
11 years, yeah.
You can just extrapolate the growth of computer power and see that that is inevitable. And the software will follow then, so that we will be able to automate routine human thought. The best example I know of is the GPS navigation systems that we are all using with such success. The problem of getting from point A to point B has been solved, to my thinking. And the same thing will happen in all these other areas where we spend enormous amount of time and energy trying to solve routine problems, like speech recognition. Computers are on the point of being able to recognize speech and translate it into machine language, and translate languages from one to another, and financial problems. All of those things, I think, will yield to artificial intelligence. So as routine human thought is automated, then humans will move up another rung on the evolutionary hierarchy to beyond knowledge, to consciousness itself. I think that is the great frontier, consciousness.
That is exciting, and that to me presupposes, or at least urges, that a kind of dialogue between scientist and philosopher, between the religious community and the world of science, between, you know, people, thoughtful people of every stripe and background, about, you know, how we actually become even better than we are as humans.
I think that's exactly what is going to happen. And this has been the history of industrialization, really, the automation of routine work. We first automated agricultural work, farming, and then industry, manufacturing work, and now we are automating services. So this is a logical progression of what's always happened. Now we are simply automating routine knowledge work. And it doesn't mean that humans are free of the the physical constraints of the world. On the contrary, scientists are right that a great deal of human thought is dictated by the sheer that organ, the brain, and all of the things that constrain it. That's absolutely true. But it doesn't explain all of human behavior. There is an important margin, I think, that is within our control, and that is where the spirit resides. And that's what the great prophets, Christ, Buddha, Mohammed, have all been concerned about, how to understand this phenomena of spirit, and to celebrate it and to see it for the miracle it is. Awareness is a miracle. It's a true miracle.
Absolutely. I mean, this is what I find exciting, because I think there's a tendency, without this kind of enlightenment that you just give us, to think of this as a competing phenomena that can overwhelm us and sort of leave us enslaved by it, actually. I mean, that's the dark vision that people pose when they talk about.
Well, all kinds of strange things could happen if we don't understand.
We have to live up to this. I mean, this is what you're saying is a possibility, but it depends upon us to do it.
Yes.
You know, even as we approach that.
And we begin by just understanding what's happening. Yeah. And that's what the spirit of this book. Right. The whole book is about helping us, all of us, to understand this revolutionary path that we are on, and to see the dangers it presents as well as the promises, the potential, and to make it a reality, and to keep it manageable, so we are not we don't fall prey to horrible unforeseen consequences.
Well, some of those challenges are going to be right upon us right away. In fact, already are. Let me cite a couple of things here. Again, the chapter on biogenetics, which obviously affects everyone, or everyone who well, everyone alive, really. But it presents us with vexing moral questions even as we speak here, because you speak at one point in this book that, and I think this is already possible, to genetically modify children in the womb.
We can control the sex, the gender of offspring right now with
at this point.
With almost 100% certainty.
That in and of itself presents a vexing moral question. And I think the pejorative for that is designer children. You get to that point, and I think China, for example, I don't know if they did it pretty crudely, but girl births, for example, were deemed undesirable, or at least less desirable.
Yes, that's right.
You get some very, very powerfully...
And in time, I don't see why it couldn't be possible to control other traits, the color of hair and skin, intelligence, height, weight, all of those qualities. And it raises, and there are other things in this field that are equally profound, that are coming under human control. I think we are on the verge of attaining mastery over the biological world, just the way we enjoyed mastery over the physical world as a result of the past 100 years or so of the science, nuclear energy, mastery over the physical world, space travel. And something similar is going to happen to the biological world. The question is, how much of it should change, and who decides what should be done with it? And
to put a focus on that, for example, it raises the questions that one might not think are problematic, but then you think one step further, you say, oh my God, maybe there is I'm referring here to the possibility of extending the lifespan.
Yes.
You can go to a century, or 120 years, I think you say, is probably the natural limit.
Well, it seems as though 120 is at this point, a natural limit on lifespan, but that could be exceeded possibly. The immediate prospects are for the average lifespan to reach 100 at about 2030, a little after 2030. That's a little more than 20 years from now. Right now it's 75 years. I think that's entirely reasonable, and all of these developments in medicine, these advanced developments, I think are leading in that direction. And by the way, our experts are very confident in that. If you go to the website, and you'll see bubble charts that depict all of these forecasts in 3 dimensions. The likely year when the various technologies will enter the mainstream, the size of the economic market, and the confidence. And when you look at the bubble charts, you see that the life extension stands out. There are trends there, and you can see how it just stands out. High confidence.
Well, it's striking. I mean, of course, that'll get everyone's attention. It got mine. But then, of course, you ask yourself, what would it mean if we live 100 years?
I know.
You know, that's subject for another conversation.
It is. I mean,
many.
people could have 4 or 5 careers in a life, maybe 2 or 3 families. It's hard to know.
Well, Dr. Halal, there is so much in
And by the way, I might point out that this is an immediate thing because children today will live to 100 years. People who are 40 and 50 years old will benefit from this. They will live to be 100 years on average.
Staggering. I'll just leave a bit of that.
That's, I know, it is. It is.
Like so much else in this book, and unfortunately our time is fleeting, and I won't have the chance to go into space and space travel and the other things you're talking about here. Yeah. But I do want to conclude with at least your very brief thought on something that is essential to all of this. It's very much in our minds right now, because you talk about what this means for the corporate community, for developing new incentivations that are more based upon cooperation, upon small group management and that kind of thing. The precise question, if you could give even a sentence or two on this, what kind of leadership will we need to confront this brave new world?
That's a really good question. I think the institutions that we have today are by and large obsolete, and that's one of the reasons we are struggling through this horrible economic recession that is global. I think institutions have to change to reflect the new realities of knowledge instead of capital.
Right.
The institutions we have now were formed during the period when capital dominated economic reality. Now it's knowledge.
Knowledge has to become the focus.
Yeah, and that knowledge is best accumulated through small collaborative teams working in self-organizing systems. That's another subject in its own right.
There are so many, and once again, let me recommend the book, Technology's Promise, so that everyone can read about all of these subjects. Thank you, Dr. Halal.
Thank you. Been a great pleasure being here with you.
And that's our program. We appreciate your comments, and you can reach us at dialogue@wilsoncenter.org. I'm George Liston, CA, and you've been watching Dialogue, a co-production of the Woodrow Wilson International Center for Scholars and MHZ Networks. Dialogue is also on the MHZ Worldview channel, which is available to public TV stations nationwide. For more information, go to www.mhzworldview.org. Please join us again right here next week, and thank you for watching this week. Dr. Halal, thank you once again.
Thank you.
You know, it's...
The Art of Conversation, Dialogue at the Woodrow Wilson Center features 20 years of dialogue, distributed by the Johns Hopkins University Press, www.press.jhu.edu.